All right, we've kind of talked about this as well, the pulmonary circuit versus the systemic circuit. We talked about the fact that the heart was essentially two separate pumps put together into one structure. The right side of the heart is for pumping blood to the lungs and back, the left side to the body and back. So you have the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. And I think we talked a little bit about the fact that the pulmonary arteries were carrying oxygen for blood. So on the pulmonary circuit, the arteries are carrying blood that needs oxygen because the pulmonary arteries are taking the blood where? To the lungs. So the only reason you would send blood to the lungs is to do what? Get oxygen. Exactly. So if you think about why, you won't be confused. Remember that arteries always pump blood away. Arteries away, veins back. It really has nothing to do with what kind of blood they're carrying. It's what direction they're carrying the blood. Blood flows from arteries into small arteries called arterioles. And from arterioles into capillaries. And then from capillaries into small veins called venules. Is that right? Yeah. And then from venules into veins. Right here, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, right here is where the action happens. The job of the arteries and the arterioles is to get the blood to the capillaries. The job of the venules and the veins is to get the blood from the capillaries back to the heart.
So the path starting back to the heart is the venules.
And what happens in the capillaries is oxygen is dropped off. Well, in the systemic capillaries, oxygen is dropped off, carbon dioxide is picked up. The opposite happens in the pulmonary capillaries. But then the blood goes back to the heart. So if you looked at arteries, you'd be like maybe this diameter, arterioles maybe this diameter, capillaries maybe like this, veins a little bigger. If we look back at the diagram of the heart muscle, there we go. That's good. This is this is thick. This is very thick. There's no way that enough oxygen could diffuse from the blood that passes through the chambers of the heart. It's too slow. Oxygen could not diffuse through here, from here to here. Does that make sense? And so the heart muscle has its own blood supply, its own arteries and arterioles and capillaries, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what we mean by the coronary circulation. So here's the aorta. They've cut the pulmonary trunk off so you can see the aorta. Here's the aorta. The first two branches that come off of the aorta are the right and left coronary arteries. Here's the left coronary artery. It comes and goes around. Here's the right coronary artery. It comes and they meet on the back. Now, what happens is when the heart contracts, especially the left ventricle, when it contracts, blood is flowing very quickly, high pressure out the aorta. When that relaxes, the blood begins to back up, and that's when you get blood flow into those arteries. Two major branches of the left coronary artery. The first one, I like this name, anterior interventricular branch. It tells me it's on the front of the heart, in between the ventricles. Clinicians, cardiologists will call this the left anterior descending artery, LAD. It's the same thing. The LAD, left anterior descending artery, is the same as the anterior interventricular branch, or anterior interventricular artery, either one's good. That one's also known as the widowmaker. You may have heard that term. If you get a clot here, your left ventricle is pretty much screwed, at least the anterior wall. The other branch, the circumflex branch, if you look at this, here's the left coronary artery. Here's the anterior branch coming down. And we're talking about the red ones, right? Okay. This one continues around the backside to form the circumflex branch. And it doesn't stop here. It's actually up underneath. See how it comes out again? Now, what's that? I don't know what that is.
Left coronary.
No.
Oh, the crown.
Well, it's the coronary sulcus, so what is that right there? Coronary sinus. Yeah. Which brings me to another point. The anterior interventricular branch is in the anterior interventricular Sulcus. Don't get sulcus and sinus mixed up. Sulcus is the groove. Oops. That's the sinus, coronary sinus. Because the coronary sinus is in the coronary sulcus. All right, so the circumflex branch is in the coronary sulcus. Right coronary artery comes out here. It sends out a small branch called the marginal branch. It's going around the margin or the edge of the heart. And then it continues on around to the backside and then sends down a branch down the backside of the heart called the posterior interventricular branch. And what's cool is here's the circumflex branch. It comes around and meets up at the beginning of the posterior interventricular branch. And so the thing is, if you have a clot right here, then blood flow can get around. Here you can see a little bit better. Here's the right coronary artery coming down, here's the marginal branch, and here's the rest of it continuing around to form the posterior interventricular branch. I don't know why they broke this, not broken. But here's the anterior interventricular branch, here's the circumflex branch coming around, and it actually meets up right here. That spot right there where those two arteries come together is called an anastomosis. Anastomoses is plural, anastomosis is singular. And in the critical areas of your body, like your heart, like the blood supply to your brain, you have lots of anastomoses. I'll give you a free one. There are 4 major blood vessels, this is free. 4 major blood vessels that carry blood into your skull. You've got the right and left internal carotid arteries. And you have the right and left vertebral arteries. Now, the right and left vertebral arteries merge artistic skills are really suffering today. You form an artery called the basilar artery. You don't know that from class, probably from that. And then these send off a branch this way, a branch this way, and a branch this way. Really having the few today. Branch comes off this way, that way, and then the branch continues around this way. And there's a couple little branches that come off here. So if you picked up a brain and you looked at it, you picked up, here's a brain looking at you like this, and you flip it over like this, and you're looking at the bottom of the brain, that's what you would see. And so you can see, these are all arteries. Blood flow is coming into the skull from the internal carotids and from the vertebral arteries. And then you have this whole set of anastomoses. This is called the circle of Willis, or the cerebral arterial circle. And so there, this is anastomosis after anastomosis after anastomosis. So if you get, one of your internal carotid arteries blocked, you're going to get blood flow. That's what an anastomosis is. All of those coronary arteries, they divide to form arterioles, which divide to form capillaries. And so oxygen from the blood is dropped off to the myocardium, carbon dioxide is picked up. That carbon dioxide has to be carried back to the right side of the heart. And so the coronary veins basically collect all the blood that's passed through the heart, through the myocardium, not the chambers of the heart, but the myocardium. And eventually all of these drain blood to the coronary sinus. And of course that's the third vessel that drains the blood into the right. The major veins, usually you have a big vein running along here called the great cardiac vein. And then on the back side, you have the middle cardiac vein, and then the coronary sinus. There are lots of other little veins, but those are kind of the major ones. that's kind of the high points of the